Imagine a plant that waits for an entire century. Not days, not months, not years. A full 100 years. And then finally, in one moment, it decides to release the most beautiful flowers you've ever seen. And then it dies. Just like that. After 100 years of waiting. This sounds like a legend, but it's completely real. And the story of this plant will make you see nature differently. I know it sounds like fiction, but let's figure this out. Allow me to introduce you to Puya Raimondii, the queen of the Andes. If nature has its own dramaturgy, then this plant is the star of the strangest screenplay. Most people on Earth don't even know about its existence. And if you're not a botanist and don't live high in the mountains of Peru, you've probably never seen it. But now you'll understand why this plant has changed the way people think about time, patience, and the meaning of life. This isn't just a story about a strange plant. It's an investigation. It's a search for an answer to a question that has haunted humans for centuries. Why does nature work so slowly? And why does beauty demand such a price? Let's start with why this phenomenon is considered miraculous. Most plants that we grow on windowsills flower every year. Some flower several times a season. Maybe they're lazy, or maybe nature is simply generous to them. Geraniums flower in summer. Orchids delight us with their blooms every season. Even cacti, which live in the desert, manage to flower at least once a year. We're used to this rhythm. We might even think it's normal. But Puya Raimondii is a completely different story. Imagine a plant that for 100 years gives no hint of flowering. No flowers. No buds. No slightest sign that something is being prepared. Nothing. Only leaves. Only waiting. That's all gardeners, collectors, even people who study this plant their whole lives see. They never see flowers. Because the plant doesn't mature before them. Time moves slower than our lives. A person grows, matures, builds a family, works, and suddenly they're 70 years old. And the plant on their windowsill looks exactly as it did 30 years ago. This created an entire myth in the scientific community. People who bought a young Puya at the beginning of the 20th century died without ever seeing it flower. This plant outlived them. It survived wars, revolutions, changes of epochs, and remains unchanged. Now that's something. Let's talk about myths because there are many. When people first learn about Puya Raimondii, they start inventing stories. It's completely natural. When we don't understand something, we fill the gaps with imagination. It's a magical plant, some say. It only flowers under the moon of a certain phase, others add. Maybe it's waiting for a comet to arrive? Suggest others. On the internet, there's a whole myth that the plant flowers only once a century, and it's an omen. Some kind of sign of fate, the end of one era and the beginning of another. Some people literally buy a young Puya, thinking they'll witness this miracle. They imagine how one day, in some magical moment, their plant will suddenly start to change color, stretch, prepare to flower. And then years pass, decades pass, and they realize it won't happen in their lifetime. It won't happen even in their children's lifetimes. Maybe their grandchildren, if they're lucky, will be able to see even the first signs of preparation for flowering. This creates a strange, almost philosophical situation. You own something that will outlive you. You care for a plant not for yourself, but for your descendants. This completely flips our logic of ownership and responsibility. There's a belief that if Puya Raimondii flowers in your home, it means you were a worthy person, that you listened carefully to nature and followed its rhythms, that you didn't try to speed anything up or violate what is alive. Some people even included Puya's flowering in their spiritual practices. They meditated next to the plant, prayed, asked it for wisdom. In some monasteries in Tibet, in secluded places of Buddhist temples, Puya's Raimondii grow. Monks say this plant teaches patience better than any book. That simply sitting next to it and observing its stillness is already meditation. Of course, it's important to understand that these are beliefs, cultural traditions, not scientific facts. But they tell us how people intuitively sense something profound in this plant. The history of this plant begins very high. In the mountains of the Andes, at altitudes over 3,000 meters above sea level. Where the air is thin, the climate is harsh, the winds are cold and piercing, and only the most resilient and adapted can survive. If you've ever been high in the mountains, you know this feeling. The sun beats down from above, but the air is icy. The day can be warm, but the night brings frost. Precipitation is rare, but when it comes, it's severe. It's an extreme environment, and it's in exactly such an environment that Puya Raimondii evolved over centuries, adapting to incredibly difficult conditions. Imagine millions of years of evolution. Plants that grew quickly died. Why? Because they quickly used up their resources, and in the mountains, resources are scarce. Water is rare. Nutrients in the soil are weakly concentrated. You need to know how to wait, accumulate, economize. Those plants that learn to grow slowly, that learn to store energy, they survived. And from them evolved the most amazing plants. Puya Raimondii is the pinnacle of this evolution. It's a plant that took the idea of accumulation and concentration of energy before one big explosion to its absolute limit. The plant was named after Antonio Raimondii, a Spanish traveler of the 19th century, who dared to explore these peaks. But the indigenous peoples of Peru and Bolivia knew this plant for centuries before that. For them, it wasn't just a flower. It was part of legend, part of the sacred history of the land. The Aztecs, Incas, other ancient mountain civilizations, all of them left traces of reverence for this plant in their traditions. There are ancient drawings on stones that, according to some researchers, depict Puya Raimondii. Although, of course, this is debatable. In some Andean cultures, there's a belief that this plant guards the mountains. According to tradition, when Puya Raimondii finally decides to flower, it means the mountain has awakened, that it's ready to share its wisdom. Something deep inside the earth has awakened and decided to open its secret to the world. This isn't just a beautiful metaphor. It reflects a genuine understanding that something in nature changes when this flowering occurs. The microclimate around the plant changes. Insects appear that weren't there before. Energy literally becomes different. In other cultures, it's said that the flowering of Puya is a sign that the gods of earth and sky have come to agreement. That balance is disrupted and nature seeks to restore it. There's a belief that people who witness Puya Raimondii flowering receive the gift of prophecy or insight, that they become, in a sense, initiated into nature's secrets. This tradition is known in many Andean communities. People speak of it quietly, with reverence. Of course, this is a spiritual explanation, and we must be careful not to pass it off as scientific fact. But let's see how close it is to scientific truth. Here's where it gets really interesting. Science. Reality. What explains the miracle in a way that seemed impossible to explain before? Puya Raimondii is a bromeliad, a member of the family that includes pineapples, ecmia, gosmania, and many other exotic plants. If you've ever seen a pineapple, you've seen a close relative of Puya. But here's what distinguishes it from all other bromeliads. This plant is monocarpic. This means it doesn't live to flower often. It lives for one moment, for one grand flowering that will give it the chance to leave offspring. And this moment requires preparation, colossal preparation. In the scientific world, there's a term, semelparity. It means plants or animals that reproduce only once in their lives and then die. Puya Raimondii is a classic example of plant world's semelparous reproduction. There are other examples. Some species of bamboo live for many decades without flowering, and then suddenly flower all at once, synchronized, and then die. There's a fish called an eel. Eels live in fresh water for many years, and then suddenly begin a migration to the ocean, reproduce, and die. There are insects like mayflies that live for several years underwater, then fly out, mate, lay eggs, and all die in one day. This is an evolutionary strategy. A strategy that has worked. Instead of spending energy on many small attempts, the organism stores everything and puts all its eggs in one big basket. When a Puya Raimondii seed germinates, a tiny grain, barely visible to the naked eye, it begins to lay down energy. Leaves grow slowly and patiently. Each leaf is a small factory for producing energy through photosynthesis. Chlorophyll molecules capture photons of light, convert them into chemical energy. Carbon dioxide from the air is transformed into sugars. These sugars move through the plant, feeding every cell. Roots go deep into the soil, collecting every important mineral. The plant accumulates resources. Calcium is needed for the strength of cell walls. Phosphorus for creating ATP, the molecule that stores energy. Nitrogen for creating proteins and amino acids. Potassium for regulating water balance. All this the plant needs to live. Years pass, leaves grow larger, the rosette expands. On the surface, nothing changes. Tourists walk by, local residents see a familiar landscape. But inside, in the tiniest cells of Puya, something invisible happens. A chemical process occurs that lasts for decades. In the cells, reserve substances accumulate. Starch is deposited in special organelles. Proteins are synthesized and stored. Fats accumulate. It's as if the plant is building a huge bank. The account grows year after year, decade after decade. The plant counts, literally counts, checks whether it has enough energy, whether enough nutrients have been accumulated, whether conditions are right for it to take the enormous risk of flowering. Because this event, this one flowering, will cost the plant everything. Absolutely everything. When Puya decides to flower, it mobilizes all its resources. Every atom, every molecule it has accumulated over the years, flies into the flower stalk. It's as if a human gave away all their savings, all their energy, all their will on one act, and then stopped existing. Imagine that psychology. Of course, a plant has no psyche. But if it did, it would be the psychology of a hero. The psychology of someone who gives everything. And when, finally, conditions coincide perfectly, right humidity, right temperature, right amount of sun, right age, when the plant cells are mature enough to handle this load, approximately 100 years from the beginning of life, the plant makes a decision. Not a conscious decision, of course. It's the result of evolution, the result of millions of years of selection. But this decision is as real as any choice a human makes. At the cellular level, gene activation occurs. Genes that have been silent all these years awaken. They begin to code for proteins necessary for flowering. Hormones like gibberellins begin to intensify. These are growth hormones that stimulate stem elongation. The concentration of auxins changes, redistributing nutrients. The plant begins to mobilize all its resources. A process called bolting begins, the formation of a stem. The plant stretches. A stem begins to grow from the center of the rosette. This isn't just any stem. It's a marvel of nature's engineering. This flower stalk can grow several meters tall. Imagine a small plant that has barely changed for 100 years, and suddenly it starts growing up, up, up. The growth rate can be quite fast. In just a few weeks, the plant can grow 2 or 3 meters. This contrasts so sharply with the previous century of immobility that it's almost frightening. It's a transformation. On this stalk, hundreds of yellow flowers bloom, maybe even thousands. Each flower is a small miracle. Beautiful, delicate, desperate. The yellow color attracts pollinators. Hummingbirds, bees, other insects. In the Andes, these flowers are like a torch in the darkness. Like a signal. Here I am. Here I am. This flowering can last several weeks, maybe even a month or more depending on conditions. And in this moment, the plant reaches the apex of its existence. Insects, birds, wind, everything brings pollen. The flowers are pollinated. Seeds mature. Thousands, tens of thousands of seeds are created. The plant has given life. It has fulfilled its biological mission. It has ensured the future of its species. It has created the possibility for Puya to continue growing in these mountains, in this harsh environment. But now it is empty, absolutely empty. It has no more energy. This was all its life. And now that life ends. The plant turns yellow, dries, dies. The flower stalk turns brown and stiff. The leaves lose moisture and become brittle. Slowly but relentlessly, the plant returns to the earth. It dies like a hero. It spent everything and left nothing for itself. But it left offspring. Thousands of young seeds, ready to begin their own path of waiting. And now the most fascinating part. Do you hear what I said? Right humidity, right temperature, right age. Conditions that coincide perfectly. The indigenous peoples of the Andes, who observed this plant for centuries, didn't have microscopes. They didn't know about molecular biology. They didn't know about hormones and phytochromes, proteins that help plants sense light. They didn't know about auxins and cytokinins, substances that manage growth. They didn't know that plants communicate through fungal networks, that beneath the earth exists an entire internet connecting plant roots and allowing them to exchange information and nutrients. But they knew something fundamental. They knew that this plant awaits awakening, that it waits for the right balance of energies, that it listens to the mountains, listens to the sky, listens to the earth. And when everything comes together, when all conditions align, a miracle happens. Science says, these are hormones, this is biochemistry, this is the result of natural selection pressure over millions of years. These are electrical signals in the plant's cells. This is the interaction between the root system and the soil, between leaves and air. These are potassium-sodium pumps in cell membranes, creating electrical potential. These are cascades of signaling molecules, transmitting information from one cell to another. This is photosynthesis, this is respiration, this is osmosis. Tradition says, this is the spirit of the mountain, this is fate, this is the moment of Earth's awakening. This is a message from the gods. This is a sign that the cosmos has aligned in a certain way, and life can continue. This is the blessing of ancestors. But if you listen more carefully, if you look deeper, you'll hear that both stories are telling the same thing. That life requires the perfect coincidence of conditions. That nature works on its own schedule, which doesn't coincide with our lives. That patience is not just a virtue. It's part of how everything around us works. It's a fundamental rule of the universe. Beauty requires time. Meaning requires time. Life requires time. Puya Raimondii now lives in museums and botanical gardens around the world. It has become a symbol of something greater than just a plant. A symbol that beauty can only be achieved through time. That meaning is not always visible immediately. That we, as humanity, might benefit from remembering that nature doesn't hurry. In Barcelona, at Kew Gardens in London, at the San Diego Botanical Garden, at the Royal Botanic Garden Edinburgh, everywhere Puya grows, people come to see it. They stand before this plant and are silent, because they understand that they're looking at history, the history of patience and devotion, the history of one plant that plays a game in which only death wins. And yet, in this death, there is grandeur. There are even recorded instances of Puya Raimondii flowering in botanical gardens. These are rare events that are carefully documented. And what's interesting, it happened only when there was a confluence of multiple conditions. When the plant received the right amount of light, when humidity was ideal, when its age approached the critical point, when temperature fluctuations met its needs. This confirms the scientific explanation. It's not magic. It's just nature working by its own laws. But precisely because it works by laws, it still remains a miracle. Because these laws, they're so complex, so intricate, that understanding them is itself a form of magic. One such instance occurred at the Rio de Janeiro Botanical Garden. A plant that came from mountain regions, survived the shock of acclimatization, lived in captivity for over 100 years, and suddenly decided to flower. This became an event in the scientific world. Botanists from all over the world came to see it. They analyzed every aspect. What was the humidity on the day of flowering? What was the temperature? How many hours of sun did the plant receive? It was like a criminal investigation, but instead of solving a crime, they were unraveling the mystery of life. We live in an age of instant results. We want things fast now, immediately. We seek likes, shares, comments within minutes of posting. We want our plants to grow quickly. We go to shops and choose flowering plants because we need immediate results. We want success to have come yesterday. But Puya Raimondii taught me something different. It showed me that sometimes the most beautiful things require so much time that we might not even be able to see them. And yet it's worth the wait. It's worth raising for our children and grandchildren. It's worth the sacrifice. This plant is a reminder that not everything in life can be sped up, that not everything can be optimized, that there are processes that require their own time, and if we try to speed them up, we break them. You can't speed up raising a child. You can't speed up learning wisdom. You can't speed up love. You can't speed up healing from grief. Puya Raimondii lives by its own schedule. And the world listens to it. The world waits. The world is patient. Psychologists say that in modern society we've lost the ability to wait. We have phones that show us results in milliseconds. We have social networks that give us a constant stream of stimulation. Our children grow up in an environment where patience is seen as a shortcoming, not a virtue. But Puya Raimondii says otherwise. It says that patience is not weakness, but strength. That it's one of nature's most powerful tools. That everything great in nature requires patience. If you ever find yourself in the mountains of Peru or in a botanical garden where this queen of the Andes grows, stop. Don't just walk by. Stop and look at it. Try to imagine the hundreds of years this plant might live. Imagine the energy that accumulates inside, in the tiniest cells, molecule by molecule. Imagine the flowering that will happen someday. Imagine the lucky person who will witness this event. Maybe it'll be you. Maybe it'll be your descendant. Maybe it'll be a complete stranger who by happy chance finds themselves in the right place at the right time. And in that moment their life will change. They'll understand that they witnessed a miracle. That they were witness to something that happens once a century. Maybe even less often. And maybe you'll understand. Nature is not just beauty. It's not just a collection of flowers and leaves that we see. It's a story of patience, a story of time, a story of meaning, a story of why we're here, a story of how life continues to exist despite everything, a story of how beauty survives in the harshest conditions, a story of how one moment can change everything. If you like this story, if you want to learn more about the strangest plants on Earth, about other wonders of nature that seem impossible until you find out why they happen, subscribe to the channel, give a like to this video, and write in the comments, what plant seems most unusual to you? Do you have a plant at home that you're growing not for yourself but for future generations? Is there anything in your life that requires patience? I read every comment. I love hearing your stories. Thank you for watching till the end.